The moment I walked into the courtroom, I felt the air shift. It wasn't the usual hum of chatter or the shuffling of papers that filled the space, it was tension, the kind that wraps around your throat and makes every breath feel earned. I'd stood in countless courtrooms before, but never like this. Never with my own parents sitting across from me, their lawyers whispering and pointing toward the woman they'd once abandoned. The woman I'd become. "Ms. Monroe, are you ready?" Caleb, my attorney, asked quietly beside me. I nodded, though my hands trembled just enough to betray the calm I tried to wear like armor. The bailiff called for silence, and the judge entered, his gavel striking once. Case number 4823, Monroe versus Monroe. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother, Victoria, sat straight-backed in a designer suit that screamed money, not motherhood. My father, Daniel, avoided my eyes completely, his gaze fixed on the polished table. I hadn't seen them in over 2 decades, not since the night they left me in a foster home when I was 4 years old and never came back. And now, here they were, suing me for $2.7 million, the inheritance my grandfather had left me, the man who'd raised me after they'd vanished. I could still remember the first time I met Grandpa Henry. I was 6, small and quiet, clutching a worn-out teddy bear as the social worker led me through the gates of his old estate. He was standing by the porch, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that carried both sorrow and kindness. "You must be Alara," he'd said gently. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you." That day, my life began again. He gave me books instead of toys, lessons instead of lectures, and love instead of apologies. By the time I turned 18, he'd built me into someone strong enough to survive without the people who'd broken me. And when he passed, he left everything to me, the house, the land, the trust fund. But his will included one final line, to my granddaughter, Alara Monroe, for never asking for what was already hers. Now my parents sat before me claiming they deserved it all. "We supported my father in his final years," my mother said when the judge asked for their statement. "It was always his intention to distribute his estate fairly." Caleb leaned toward me, whispering, "She's lying. We have the hospital records, they never visited him once." I didn't respond. My eyes stayed fixed on her, on the woman who'd taught me that love had conditions, and that silence was survival. As she spoke, I realized she wasn't fighting for money, she was fighting for power. The same power she'd lost the day I stopped needing her. I thought I'd come to court to defend my inheritance, but as the trial unfolded, I realized I was fighting for something far bigger, the truth about why they'd really come back after 22 years. When Caleb stood for the cross-examination, his voice carried the calm precision of a man sharpening a blade. "Mrs. Monroe," he began, "you stated that you and your husband supported your father financially and emotionally during his final years, correct?" My mother straightened her posture, flashing the courtroom her well-practiced smile. "That's right. We were by his side through everything." Caleb nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you can explain why there are no medical records, visitation logs, or transactions that show either of you contributed to his care?" Her smile faltered, just slightly. I don't recall the specifics. We provided in other ways." Caleb took a step closer. "Other ways?" "Because according to the hospital's visitor log, the only Monroe listed during that entire period was Alara." He pointed toward me. "She was there, not you." A hush rippled through the room. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening as he avoided my gaze. Caleb continued, "Isn't it true, Mrs. Monroe, that Judge Henry Monroe, your father, cut off financial ties with you after discovering you embezzled funds from his charitable trust 15 years ago?" The color drained from her face. "That's irrelevant," she hissed. "This case isn't about that." "On the contrary," Caleb said smoothly, "it's about pattern and intent. You didn't come here seeking fairness, you came here seeking control over what you lost." He turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, We have documentation proving the plaintiffs attempted to sell property belonging to the estate before the will was even read. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge called for order, his gavel striking the desk sharply. My mother's hands trembled as she whispered something to her lawyer, her composure cracking. My father finally spoke, his voice low and brittle. "We were desperate," he said. "After Henry died, we thought." He trailed off, his words fading under the weight of his own guilt. I stared at him, stunned. It was the first time I'd ever heard honesty in his voice. But it didn't make the pain easier to swallow. For years, I'd imagined what it would feel like to see them again, to have them regret what they'd done, to maybe even apologize. Instead, they'd come back with lawyers and lies. Caleb glanced at me, as if to ask if I wanted to continue pressing, but I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Let them talk." My mother turned toward me then, eyes sharp and wet. "You think you're better than us now, don't you?" She spat quietly. "Sitting there in your little suit, pretending you earned any of this." Her voice rose. "You're nothing without us. You always were." I met her stare and spoke for the first time that day. "Then why are you the one sitting here begging for what's mine?" The courtroom went silent, but behind my mother's glare, I caught something that made my stomach twist, fear. And I was about to find out exactly what she was afraid of. That night, after the hearing adjourned, I sat in Caleb's office surrounded by folders, legal pads, and the dull glow of the desk lamp cutting through the tension. The air smelled like stale coffee and exhaustion. "There's something we're missing," Caleb muttered, flipping through a copy of my grandfather's will for the 10th time. "Your parents wouldn't risk a public lawsuit unless there was something bigger at stake than just your inheritance." I rubbed my temples, the weight of the day pressing behind my eyes. "You think they found a loophole?" "Maybe," he said, eyes narrowing at a section of fine print near the bottom of the page. "Wait, look here." He turned the paper toward me and tapped a line I'd never paid attention to before. "In the event of any dispute over this estate, an ancillary clause regarding the Monroe Foundation will be triggered." I frowned. "The foundation?" "That's the charity Grandpa created before I was born." Caleb nodded. "And it's still active. This clause means the lawsuit doesn't just threaten your inheritance, it could dissolve the foundation entirely. If that happens, its remaining assets revert to the family trust." My heart skipped. "Which means, your parents," he finished grimly. "If they win, they get everything." The realization hit like a blow. It wasn't just greed, it was strategy. They'd never cared about the house, the land, or the money. They wanted to erase the one part of Grandpa's legacy that couldn't be bought, the foundation that funded shelters, scholarships, and community projects. The one thing that still made his name mean something. "We can't let them do this," I said, my voice steady even as my hands trembled. Caleb's expression hardened. "Then we'll find out what else they've been hiding." The next morning, I arrived early at the courthouse, coffee in hand and resolve in my chest. As I waited for Caleb, I noticed my mother standing near the hallway, whispering urgently to a man I didn't recognize, a tall, suited figure with an expensive watch and a briefcase clutched tight. Their conversation looked tense. When they parted, he slipped her a folder, and she shoved it into her bag before walking away. I followed at a distance, curiosity winning over caution. Later, during recess, I saw her leave her purse unattended by the bench. My pulse quickened. I wasn't proud of what I did, but I reached inside and took a quick photo of the folder's first page before she returned. It was an old document stamped with the foundation's logo, something about property rights reassignment. When Caleb saw the photo, his jaw dropped. "This isn't just a legal ploy," he said. "This is fraud. They're trying to transfer foundation assets into their own names before the case even ends." My stomach twisted. "So they've been planning this for months?" He nodded grimly. "Maybe years." I looked toward the courtroom doors, my heartbeat loud in my ears. For the first time, I wasn't just defending my inheritance, I was defending my grandfather's name. But the next witness on the stand wasn't one of my parents, it was someone I hadn't seen in 20 years. Someone who held the truth that could destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. When the bailiff called the next witness, I felt my stomach tighten. "The defense calls Eleanor Brooks to the stand," Caleb said, his tone calm but deliberate. The name meant nothing to the courtroom, but it meant everything to me. Eleanor. My old nanny. The woman who used to hum lullabies when nightmares kept me awake. The one who'd vanished the same year my parents left. As she took her seat, I barely recognized her, her once dark hair now streaked with silver, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her glasses. But when her eyes met mine, there was that same quiet kindness I remembered. "Ms. Brooks," Caleb began, "can you tell the court your relationship to the Monroe family?" "I worked for them," she said, her voice thin but steady. "I was hired when Alara was a baby. I cared for her until she was 4. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "And why did your employment end?" Eleanor hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of the witness stand. "Because I caught them signing papers to send Alara away." A gasp rippled through the room. Caleb nodded slowly. "You're saying Victoria and Daniel Monroe arranged to give up custody?" Eleanor's eyes welled, but her voice didn't waver. "Yes. They said she was too much trouble. That they couldn't afford a child anymore." My mother shot up from her seat. "That's a lie." She snapped, but the judge's gavel silenced her. Eleanor continued, her gaze locked on me. "Your grandfather didn't know right away. When he found out months later, he was furious. He hired private investigators, traced her to a foster home, and brought her back himself. He told me he'd never forgive his son and daughter-in-law. That day, he changed his will." The courtroom fell completely silent. Caleb leaned closer. "Did Judge Henry Monroe ever mention revising his will or adding new conditions?" "He did," she said. "He told me he wanted to make sure Alara would never have to depend on anyone who didn't fight for her. He said, if they ever come for her again, the law will protect her even when I can't." My chest tightened, tears threatening to fall. Caleb showed her a document. "Is this your signature?" Eleanor nodded. "Yes, that's the statement I gave him the day he made the change." Caleb turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, this confirms the final amendment to the will was not about favoritism, it was about protection. It directly contradicts the plaintiff's claim of intent." Across the aisle, my mother's face hardened, but there was panic in her eyes now, a trapped look, as if she'd been cornered in her own game. My father sat motionless, his hands folded tightly in his lap. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or shame that kept him quiet. As Eleanor stepped down, she paused by my table and touched my shoulder gently. "He loved you more than anything," she whispered. "He wanted you to remember that." I swallowed hard and nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I thought the truth would set me free, but that night, I found a letter in my grandfather's handwriting hidden inside his old briefcase, and what it said changed everything I believed about his legacy, and my parents' betrayal. After court adjourned that evening, I couldn't go home. My mind replayed Eleanor's words over and over, every sentence peeling back a piece of the past I thought I'd already buried. Caleb had offered to walk me to my car, but I told him I needed time alone. Instead, I drove to my grandfather's old estate, the one place that still smelled like old books, cedarwood, and comfort. The house had been quiet since the day of his funeral, but as I stepped inside, I could almost hear his voice echoing from the study, the same room where he used to read to me about justice, about integrity, about how the truth always came out in time. I walked to the bookshelf, tracing my fingers along the spines until I reached the small locked drawer beneath his desk. It had always been there, and for years, I'd ignored it. Now, something about it tugged at me. Using the spare key he'd left hidden inside an old law journal, I opened it. Inside was a single brown envelope, my name scrawled across the front in his familiar handwriting, For Alara, only when the time is right. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Alara, it began, if you're reading this, it means they've come for what was never theirs. You must understand that everything I built, the estate, the foundation, even the wealth, was never the real inheritance. What I left you is choice. I paused, my eyes burning. The Monroe Foundation's assets were divided into two branches, one public, one private. The public trust funds the projects you know about, but the private one holds something more valuable, the legal authority to dismantle or reassign ownership. It's hidden in a secondary clause, accessible only by the true heir, through a signature verification I arranged before my passing. I did this because I knew your parents would try to manipulate the system. If they succeed in proving you unfit or undeserving, that clause activates, and the Foundation's control transfers to the next eligible Monroe descendant. My pulse quickened. Next eligible descendant? I whispered aloud. That could only mean one thing, me or someone else. The final line made my blood run cold. If they find this letter before you do, they'll use it against you. Be cautious, my dear. They will not stop until they've taken everything. I sat back in the leather chair, the weight of the words pressing down like a verdict. My grandfather had built a fortress of protection, but he'd also left me with a ticking time bomb. If the hidden clause was triggered, everything, his charity, his name, and my security, could vanish. I locked the letter back in the drawer and stared out the window as rain began to fall, streaking the glass in thin silver lines. For the first time, I realized my parents weren't just fighting for greed, they were racing against time. Somewhere, they already knew about this clause. And if I didn't act fast, they'd win everything by exploiting the one secret my grandfather had left me to protect. The next morning, I walked into court ready to fight, but before the hearing began, my mother handed a document to the judge that froze the entire room. She'd found the clause first. The courtroom was colder that morning, as if the walls themselves could sense what was coming. My mother entered with a confidence that wasn't there before, a quiet satisfaction in her stride that made my stomach twist. Caleb noticed it too. Something's off, he whispered as we stood for the judge's entrance. Moments later, she reached into her briefcase and slid a sealed envelope across the plaintiff's table. Your Honor, her lawyer announced, we have new evidence pertaining to the late Judge Henry Monroe's estate, specifically, an undisclosed clause found in the trust addendum. My heart stopped. Caleb immediately rose to object, but the judge raised his hand. I'll allow it, Judge Stanton said. Proceed. The lawyer opened the envelope and handed copies to both sides. My eyes widened as I scanned the first page. It was the exact clause my grandfather had warned me about, the private trust reassignment provision. Only this version was edited. Paragraph 3, the one mentioning the true heir's signature verification, had been altered to say, upon legal contest, authority defaults to the next of kin with direct parental lineage. My mother smiled faintly, watching my reaction. She'd found the original clause and rewritten it to exclude me. Your Honor, her lawyer continued, this proves that the Foundation's assets rightfully revert to Mrs. Monroe and her husband as the living direct descendants of Judge Monroe. Caleb flipped through the document, his jaw tightening. Your Honor, this is a forgery, he said firmly. The language and structure don't match the official trust format. Do you have proof? The judge asked. Caleb exhaled. Not yet. But we can obtain it. My mother's lawyer smirked. How convenient. For a brief, terrible moment, the room tilted around me. The air felt heavy, pressing on my chest. My grandfather's words echoed in my head, if they find this before you do, they'll use it against you. I'd been too late. Then, something clicked. Wait, I said suddenly, standing. The judge looked up. Ms. Monroe? This document, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, mentions a signature verification process, correct? Yes, the judge replied cautiously. Then there should be a record of the original verification, some form of witness authentication or digital log. Caleb's eyes lit up. Exactly. If the signature's validity was ever encoded, it would be stored in the notary's archive system. If the plaintiff altered this document, the metadata will expose it. The judge leaned back, considering. Very well, I'm ordering a forensic review of both versions. The hearing will recess until the results return. My mother's confidence flickered, but she kept her mask intact. As the courtroom emptied, she leaned close and whispered, "You think you're clever, Elara, but you forget who taught you how to fight." I met her gaze, my voice low. "You didn't teach me how to fight, Mother, you taught me what to fight against." I thought I'd bought time, but that night, someone broke into my grandfather's estate, and the only thing missing was the original copy of his will. The rain was relentless that night, hammering against my windshield as I pulled up to my grandfather's estate. The gate was half open, a detail that immediately sent unease crawling up my spine. I always locked it. Always. My headlights swept over the front porch, where the door hung slightly ajar, its frame splintered near the lock. My breath caught. "No," I whispered, rushing out of the car, rain soaking through my coat as I ran up the steps. Inside, the air was cold and wrong. Drawers were open, papers scattered, the smell of wet earth mixing with old wood and fear. My grandfather's study, the one place that had always felt untouchable, was ransacked. Books torn from shelves, his desk overturned, and the drawer where I'd hidden the letter now empty. The briefcase that had once held his will lay open on the floor, gutted. Someone had found it. I called Caleb immediately. "Someone broke in," I said, my voice trembling. "The letter, it's gone." He didn't respond right away. Just silence, then a careful, measured tone. "Don't touch anything. I'll call the police." "Caleb," I said, pacing, they knew exactly where to look. Whoever did this wasn't searching, they were retrieving. "Elara," he said softly, "just stay put. I'm on my way." But when I hung up and looked around, I noticed something strange, a faint trail of muddy footprints leading away from the window toward the back door. They were large yet heavy, not the type left by my parents. By the time the police arrived, Caleb was already there. His suit was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked around the wreckage with grim focus. "This was professional," he muttered. "No broken glass, no random destruction. They came for one thing." The officer approached. "Do you have any idea what was taken?" I hesitated, then lied. "Old family documents. Nothing of monetary value." Caleb glanced at me, understanding my choice. We both knew if word got out that the original will was missing, it would give my parents more ammunition in court. After the officers left, I sank onto the couch, exhausted. "Someone knew where I kept it," I said quietly. "Only you and I did." Caleb didn't answer. He just rubbed the back of his neck, eyes distant. "Elara, there's something you should know," he finally said. "When I joined your case, I thought it was just a standard estate dispute. But yesterday, I got an anonymous email, someone offering me money to hand over the original documents." I froze. "And you're telling me this now?" He nodded. "Because I turned them down. But they knew details about the trust no outsider should. This isn't just about your parents anymore." My pulse raced. "Then who?" Caleb looked at me, his expression grim. "There's another name tied to the Monroe Foundation. Someone your grandfather never mentioned, a silent co-founder." The room seemed to tilt, every memory of my grandfather suddenly shadowed by doubt. "Who?" I whispered. Caleb exhaled. "A man named Lucas Pratt. He disappeared 20 years ago, but according to the Foundation's records, he still owns half." I thought I'd uncovered every secret my family had buried, but Lucas Pratt wasn't just alive. He was the reason my parents had come back, and he was about to walk into court himself. The next morning, The courtroom buzzed louder than usual, reporters whispering, cameras flashing outside, the kind of tension that only comes when everyone knows something explosive is about to happen. Caleb leaned over, his voice low. "He's here." I followed his gaze toward the door. A tall man entered, gray suit pressed sharp, dark eyes scanning the room like someone who already knew he didn't belong yet owned the air he breathed. His stride was confident, unhurried. When the bailiff called his name, the room went still. "Mr. Lucas Pratt." My heartbeat stumbled. I'd seen that name on the Foundation's earliest documents, buried deep in the archives, but I never imagined he was real, let alone alive. He took the witness stand, every movement precise. "Mr. Pratt," Caleb began, "you were listed as a co-founder of the Monroe Foundation, correct?" Lucas smiled faintly. "Co-founder, yes. But not by choice. Henry Monroe and I started it together, until he pushed me out." My mother sat forward in her seat, tension rippling through her posture. "Why now?" Caleb asked. "Why come forward after 20 years? Lucas looked directly at me. "Because I was promised something that was stolen from me. Half the Foundation's assets, and more importantly, half of its legacy." His words landed heavy, but something in his tone felt wrong, too rehearsed. "And who promised you this?" Caleb asked. Lucas turned toward my parents. "Them," he said. "Victoria and Daniel Monroe." The courtroom erupted in whispers. My parents' faces drained of color. "That's a lie," my mother snapped, standing. "We barely knew you." Lucas chuckled, slow and deliberate. "Then why did you sign a memorandum of agreement with me 3 months ago?" He pulled out a document, unfolding it with meticulous care. My stomach dropped. I recognized the signature, my mother's. Caleb's jaw clenched. "Your Honor, we request immediate verification of that document's authenticity." The judge nodded, motioning for the bailiff to collect it. My mother whispered furiously to her lawyer, but the damage was done. Lucas leaned back, his expression calm and calculated. "You see, Henry Monroe wasn't the saint everyone believes he was. He built the Foundation on my research and my investment. When he cut me out, he swore his family would never see a dime of what was truly mine. So, when they came to me desperate to claim what they thought was theirs, I decided to help, for a price." I stared at him, anger rising like heat in my chest. "You used them," I said quietly. "You used all of us." Lucas's gaze flicked to me, cool and unwavering. "No, Ms. Monroe. I simply took back what was promised. Your family's greed just made it easy." For a moment, the room was silent, then Caleb rose, voice steady. "Mr. Pratt, are you aware that the clause you're exploiting requires validation from the Foundation's living chair?" "Of course," Lucas said with a smirk. "Which is why, as of this morning, I am the chair. The documents transferring control were filed yesterday." The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed the gavel for order. My heart pounded as Caleb turned to me, whispering, "He's lying. He doesn't have authority, unless..." I finished the sentence for him. "Unless someone from inside signed it over." And when Caleb's assistant walked in, pale and shaking, holding a file marked confidential, internal authorization, I already knew whose signature was inside, mine. The sound of that folder hitting the table was louder than the judge's gavel. Every muscle in my body went rigid as Caleb's assistant placed the file in front of us, her hands trembling. "It was emailed from your account," she whispered, eyes darting toward me. "Time-stamped last night." My pulse thudded in my ears. "That's impossible," I said, my voice cracking. Caleb opened the folder, scanning the pages, and then froze. There it was. My name, my signature, clean and perfect at the bottom of the authorization form transferring control of the Foundation to Lucas Pratt. For a split second, the world tilted, everything blurring except for the neat curve of the forged ink that could destroy everything my grandfather built. We need a recess, Caleb said quickly, his voice strained. Denied, the judge replied. We're resolving this now. Lucas smiled like the devil himself had written the script. You see, Your Honor? Even she knows the foundation was never hers to begin with. My mother's smirk returned, smug and poisonous. It's over, Elara. You can't win against the truth. The truth? I repeated, standing. You wouldn't know the truth if it signed its name in front of you. I looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, I never signed those documents. If I may, I'd like to request immediate digital verification. The Monroe Foundation used biometric encryption on all internal signatures. It'll prove this was forged. The judge hesitated. Proceed. Caleb's assistant hurried forward with the company's verification tablet, connecting to the legal database. My hands trembled as I placed my thumb on the scanner. Within seconds, a soft chime echoed through the room. Signature invalid. Source mismatch. Document falsified. The courtroom gasped. Lucas's smirk disappeared. My mother paled. Caleb exhaled a breath I didn't realize he'd been holding. Your Honor, he said sharply, this confirms the signature was forged using a counterfeit authorization key. Only someone with internal access could have done that. I turned to Lucas. You thought you could rewrite the past the same way you rewrote your story, but you forgot something. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a USB drive. My grandfather recorded every foundation meeting, including the day you tried to blackmail him into partnership. Lucas's eyes widened. That's not possible, those recordings were destroyed. No, I said quietly, they were encrypted. And he left me the key. Caleb plugged the drive into the courtroom monitor, and the speakers crackled to life with my grandfather's unmistakable voice. Lucas, if you ever attempt to claim what isn't yours, know this, you forfeited your rights when you forged my name. The room fell into stunned silence. The judge looked from me to Lucas, then to my parents. Mr. Pratt, Mrs. Monroe, Mr. Monroe, this court finds your actions constitute fraud, forgery, and willful misrepresentation. The estate and foundation remain under Ms. Monroe's rightful control. The gavel fell. It was over. My mother stood frozen, her face unreadable. My father couldn't even look at me. Lucas was led away in handcuffs, his expression twisting from arrogance to disbelief. I stood there, not triumphant, just finally free. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The air smelled new, clean. Caleb turned to me, smiling faintly. He'd be proud, you know. I nodded, clutching my grandfather's ring that I wore around my neck. He already is. I looked back at the courthouse doors, sunlight breaking through the clouds. Justice isn't about winning, I said quietly. It's about remembering who you are when everyone tries to make you forget. Months later, when I stood in that same courtroom again, this time wearing the judge's robe my grandfather once wore, I finally understood what he'd meant by legacy. It wasn't money or titles. It was the courage to turn pain into truth.